Hashtag they thought humans feared battle. Until a ruthless sniper struck, the Galactic Council chambers buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered around the massive holographic display. The image showed a human military outpost on the frontier planet Kepler, 442b, surrounded by the advancing forces of the Zephyrian Empire. Commander Vextal of the Zephyrians stood tall, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. His scales gleamed under the artificial lighting, each one bearing the scars of countless battles. "Honored council members," he began, his voice carrying the hiss that marked his species, "I present to you the final proof that humanity is not fit for membership in our alliance." The hologram shifted to show aerial footage of human soldiers retreating from various battlefields across the galaxy. Explosions lit up the darkness as ships fled through hyperspace, leaving behind burning installations and abandoned equipment. "For 3 standard cycles, we have observed human military responses," Vextal continued, manipulating the display with a gesture of his clawed hand. "In every engagement, every conflict, every skirmish, they demonstrate the same pattern. They run, they hide, they avoid direct confrontation at all costs." Counselor Muraeth of the Centaurian Republic, her blue skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated skepticism, leaned forward in her floating chair. "Commander, surely you exaggerate. Humans have shown technological innovation and strategic thinking in their applications to join our alliance." "Innovation born of cowardice," Vextal spat, his forked tongue flicking out briefly. "They create weapons they never intend to use in honorable combat. They develop tactics designed around retreat and evasion. Their entire military philosophy is built upon the foundation of avoiding real battle." The display changed again, showing intercepted human military communications. Text scrolled across the screen in various human languages, all translated into Galactic Standard. Messages about tactical withdrawals, strategic repositioning, and minimal engagement protocols filled the air above the council chamber. Ambassador Thakran of the Crystalline Silicate Collective spoke up, his voice resonating like wind through crystal caves. "These communications suggest a species that values preservation of life over military glory. Is this not admirable?" "Admirable." Vextal's laugh was a harsh sound that made several council members flinch. "You speak of a species that claims to want to join our alliance, yet refuses to shed blood alongside us when the time comes for war. What use our allies who will not fight?" The massive Ursoid delegate, General Karmoth, shifted his enormous frame. His species had evolved from bear-like creatures on a high-gravity world, and their respect for martial prowess was legendary throughout the galaxy. "The Zephyrian speaks truth," he rumbled in a voice like distant thunder. "In our culture, we judge worthiness by willingness to face death in battle. These humans, they lack honor." Vextal nodded approvingly at the support. "Exactly. And now I propose to demonstrate this definitively. My forces have surrounded the human research station on Kepler, 442b. 50 human soldiers guard a facility containing their most advanced weapons research. If they truly deserve membership in our alliance, let them prove it in honorable combat." The hologram zoomed in on the human outpost, a cluster of prefabricated buildings surrounded by energy barriers and defensive turrets. The structures looked small and vulnerable against the backdrop of the alien landscape, with its purple vegetation and twin moons hanging in the bronze-colored sky. "Your proposition?" asked Counselor Muraeth, though her tone suggested she already disapproved. "Simple," Vextal said, his eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. "My warriors will assault the facility. If the humans stand and fight with honor, they may retain their application for alliance membership. If they flee as they always do." He spread his hands in a gesture of finality. "Then, we close the matter permanently." An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. The various species represented had different views on warfare and honor, but most recognized the political implications of Vextal's challenge. The Zephyrian Empire was powerful, controlling several key trade routes and military installations. Their opposition to human membership carried significant weight. Dr. Velterra of the pacifist Ethereal Conclave spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Is this truly necessary? Must we measure a species by their willingness to die in battle? What other measure matters? Big counter. When the galaxy faces threats, when worlds burn, and civilizations hang in the balance, what good are allies who value their own lives above the cause? The humans have never proven they will sacrifice for others. The debate continued for several more minutes, but the outcome was increasingly clear. The military representatives outnumbered the pacifist voices, and political pressure was mounting. Finally, Council Prime Zarthek called for order with a resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The challenge is accepted, the Prime announced in the ancient formal language of the Council. Commander Vextal, you may proceed with your demonstration. However, the assault will be monitored by neutral observers to ensure fairness. Vextal bowed low, but his satisfaction was evident. Of course, Prime. We have nothing to hide. The truth of human cowardice will speak for itself. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out, few noticed the small figure in the observation gallery above. Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force had been present as part of the human diplomatic mission, listening to every word of the proceedings. Unlike the scaled, furred, or crystalline beings that dominated galactic politics, Chun looked unremarkably human. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a regulation military ponytail, dark eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform bore few decorations, just the simple rank insignia and a single ribbon that most aliens wouldn't recognize. That ribbon represented something the galaxy had never seen before. Chun activated her communicator with a touch to her collar. Command, this is Chun. We have a situation. The response came immediately. Go ahead, Captain. The Zephyrians are moving against Outpost 7 on Kepler, 442b. Full assault, monitored by the Council. They're using this as a test of human resolve. A pause on the other end. Understood. What's the tactical situation? Chun looked down at the holographic display that still showed the human outpost. 50 soldiers against what looked like several thousand Zephyrian warriors, supported by armored vehicles and air support. By any conventional military assessment, it was a hopeless situation. Overwhelming enemy forces, no possibility of reinforcement, no escape route, she reported calmly. Classic last stand scenario. Another pause. And your assessment, Captain? Sarah Chun smiled, and there was something in that expression that would have made even Commander Vextal pause if he could have seen it. It was the smile of someone who knew something important that others did not. Perfect conditions for a demonstration, sir. Request permission to join Outpost 7's defense. Granted. Show them what they've been missing, Captain. As Chun made her way toward the transport bay, she reflected on the galaxy's misconception about humanity. They saw the retreats, the tactical withdrawals, the reluctance to engage in direct assault. What they failed to understand was that humans didn't avoid battle because they feared it. They avoided battle because they were very, very good at it. The transport ship Quiet Storm departed the Council station within the hour, its destination the besieged human outpost on Kepler, 442b. In its cargo hold, Captain Shin checked her equipment one final time. The rifle case was unremarkable, standard military issue. The weapon inside was anything but standard. As they entered hyperspace, Chun opened a secure channel to Outpost 7. This is Captain Chun, incoming to your position. What's your situation, Major? Major Williams' voice crackled through the comm. 50 soldiers, decent defensive positions, enough ammunition for maybe 6 hours of heavy fighting. Enemy forces are massive, Captain. They're giving us time to consider surrender. Are you considering it? Williams' laugh was grim. No, ma'am. We've got civilians in the research facility. Scientists who've been working on some pretty important projects. We're not leaving them behind. Good man. I'll be with you in 18 hours. Think you can hold until then? We'll manage, Captain. Though I have to ask, one more soldier isn't going to change the odds much. Captain Chin looked at her rifle case and smiled that same cold smile. We'll see about that, Major. We'll see about that. Hashtag the siege begins. The transport Quiet Storm dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442b system, its sensors immediately picking up the massive Zephyrian fleet in orbit around the planet. Captain Chun studied the tactical display with professional interest, noting the positioning of the enemy ships and the deployment patterns of their ground forces. Textbook siege formation, she murmured to herself, watching as the holographic representation updated in real time. They're not taking any chances. Commander Vextal's fleet consisted of 3 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and dozens of smaller assault craft. More than enough firepower to glass the entire planet, if they chose to. But that wasn't the point of this exercise. The Zephyrians wanted demonstration of human cowardice, and orbital bombardment would rob them of their political victory. Chun opened a channel to the flagship. Zephyrian Command, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force, requesting permission to land at the Human Research Facility. The response came after a brief delay, and Chun could hear the amusement in the alien voice. Permission granted, human. We are curious to see what one additional soldier believes she can accomplish. Just doing my job, Commander. The transport descended through the planet's atmosphere, past the circling Zephyrian air support, and toward the small cluster of buildings that represented humanity's last stand on this world. The pilot, a veteran named Rodriguez, shook his head as they approached. Forgive me saying so, Captain, but this looks like a suicide mission. Chun was checking her equipment methodically, each piece inspected and secured. Rodriguez, how long have you been flying for the TDF? 8 years, ma'am. In those 8 years, how many times have you seen humans run from a fight when civilians needed protecting? The pilot considered this for a moment. Well, never, actually. But, Captain, there's 50 soldiers down, they're facing thousands of enemies. This isn't about courage, it's about mathematics. Mathematics can be flexible, Chin replied cryptically. The transport touched down in the outpost's small landing bay just as the sun began to set over Kepler 442b's alien landscape. The bronze sky was streaked with purple clouds, and the twin moons were already visible in the darkening heavens. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Major Williams was waiting for Chun as she disembarked. He was a tall man with graying temples and the kind of steady demeanor that inspired confidence in his soldiers. His uniform was practical rather than ceremonial, with extra ammunition pouches and a sidearm that looked well-maintained. Captain Chun, he said, offering a salute that she returned crisply. Welcome to our little fortress. Status report, Major. Williams gestured toward the perimeter. Enemy forces have established a complete encirclement approximately 2 kilometers out. Our sensors count roughly 3,000 Zephyrian warriors supported by armored vehicles and artillery. They've been probing our defenses for the last 6 hours, testing response times and mapping our positions. They walked through the facility as Williams briefed her. The outpost was larger than it had appeared from orbit, with 3 main levels extending underground. The research laboratories occupied the lower levels, while the upper level housed living quarters, communications, and command facilities. The good news, Williams continued, is that our defensive turrets are functioning perfectly, and we have good fields of fire from the elevated positions. The bad news is that we're outnumbered 60-1, and they have air support. Chin nodded, taking mental notes of everything she saw. The human soldiers they passed looked alert, but tired, the kind of fatigue that came from too many hours of high stress. They were good soldiers, though. She could see it in their posture, their weapon maintenance, the way they coordinated their movements without conscious thought. What about the civilians? 18 researchers and support staff in the lower levels, Williams replied. They're working on some kind of advanced weapon system, but it's not ready for deployment. Dr. Patterson can give you the details if you need them. They reached the command center, a compact room filled with displays showing the tactical situation around the outpost. Red dots marked enemy positions in a complete circle around their location, while blue indicators showed the human defensive positions. It looked like a classic siege scenario from any military textbook. Major, Chun said, studying the displays, I need you to understand something about my role here. Williams raised an eyebrow. Mom, the Zephyrians think this is a test of human courage. They expect you to either surrender or fight bravely and die. They're not expecting anything else. With respect, Captain, what else is there? We can't fight 3,000 enemies with 50 soldiers and win. Chin opened her rifle case and began assembling her weapon. It was unlike anything Williams had ever seen in human service. The barrel was longer than a standard rifle, with specialized optics and a suppression system that looked almost organic in its complexity. The ammunition was equally unusual, with rounds that seemed to shimmer with their own internal light. Major, what do you know about the Battle of Stalingrad? Williams frowned at the apparent non sequitur. World War II, Earth history. The German army besieged the city, but the Russians held out and eventually counterattacked. Good basic knowledge, Chun said, continuing to assemble her rifle with practiced movements. But the history books miss some important details. What turned the tide wasn't just Russian determination or German overextension. It was snipers, individual marksmen who made the enemy afraid to show themselves. She held up one of her specialized rounds. This is a smart round, Major. Once fired, it can adjust its trajectory within certain parameters. It can penetrate most known armor systems, and it has a range of approximately 15 kilometers in standard atmosphere. Williams stared at the ammunition. 15 kilometers? The Zephyrians are expecting a conventional battle. Chun continued, shouldering her weapon to check the balance. They're expecting heroic charges and desperate last stands. They're not expecting asymmetric warfare. A communication alert sounded, and the display showed an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian forces. Williams accepted it, and the scaled features of a Zephyrian field commander appeared on screen. Human soldiers, the alien said in accented standard. I am war leader Kethvar, commanding the forces that surround your position. You have fought bravely, but your situation is hopeless. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Williams looked at Chun, who nodded slightly. The Major stepped forward to respond. War leader, this is Major Williams. We appreciate your offer, but we're going to have to decline. Kethvar's features showed what might have been surprise. You choose to die for no purpose? Your reinforcements cannot reach you. Your weapons cannot prevail against our numbers. Maybe, Williams said, but we've got civilians to protect, and that's what we're going to do. So be it, the war leader replied. We attack at dawn. Die well, humans. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in silence. Williams turned to Chun, who was making final adjustments to her rifle's targeting system. Captain, I hope you have a plan beyond just being a very good shot. Chun smiled, and again there was something in that expression that spoke of knowledge and preparation that went far beyond what was visible. Major, in approximately 9 hours, the Zephyrians are going to learn something about humans that the galaxy hasn't figured out yet, which is, we don't fight fair. As night fell over Kepler, 442b, Captain Chun took position on the outpost highest tower, her rifle trained on the enemy positions in the distance. Through her scope, she could see the Zephyrian camps, their fires flickering like stars in the darkness. She opened her comm to the galactic observers monitoring the battle. Observer station, this is Captain Chun. Be advised, the demonstration will begin shortly after sunrise. The response came from Counselor Mirieth herself. Captain, we are monitoring the situation. The Zephyrian forces are overwhelming. Surely you must see that resistance is futile. Counselor, Chun replied, settling into her firing position with the patience of a professional hunter. Respectfully, I think you're about to learn something new about humanity. In the distance, War Leader Kethvar was briefing his subcommanders on the morning assault. They had studied human military tactics extensively and were prepared for desperate counterattacks, last-minute surrender offers, or futile charges against superior numbers. They were not prepared for what was actually coming. Captain Chun chambered her first round and began calculating wind patterns, atmospheric density, and gravitational effects. The range to the primary target was 14.7 kilometers, well within her weapon's capabilities. Through her scope, she could see the Zephyrian command post clearly, the figures moving around it unaware that death was watching from an impossible distance. Time to work, she whispered to herself, and settled in to wait for dawn. Hashtag the ghost in the scope, the first light of Kepler. 442b's orange sun crested the horizon, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. War leader Kethvar stood before his assembled forces, his scaled hide gleaming in the morning light. 3,000 Zephyrian warriors arrayed in perfect formation, their weapons powered and ready. The sight would have struck fear into the heart of any conventional enemy. Warriors of the Empire, Kethvar's voice carried across the assembled ranks, amplified by his suit speakers. Today we complete our demonstration to the galaxy. These humans cower behind their barriers, hoping their walls will save them. We will show them the futility of resistance. Through her scope, Captain Chun watched the speech from her position 14 kilometers away. She had been in position for 6 hours, motionless as a statue, her breathing controlled and her heart rate steady. This was what she had trained for her entire adult life. The Zephyrian war leader raised his ceremonial blade, a gesture that would signal the beginning of the assault. Chun adjusted her aim fractionally, compensating for the morning wind patterns she had been tracking since before dawn. For the glory of the smart round took Kethvar in the center of his chest armor, penetrating the advanced alloys as if they were paper. The war leader collapsed backward, his final words lost in the sudden chaos that erupted among his forces. The Zephyrians stared in shock at their fallen commander. The sound of the distant gunshot hadn't even reached them yet, traveling much slower than the hypersonic projectile that had killed their leader. When it finally arrived, a sharp crack across the landscape, they began to understand. Subcommander Vexhai, Kethvar's second-in-command, immediately activated his communication array. All units, we are under sniper fire. Locate and eliminate the target. But Chun was already repositioning. The beauty of her weapon system was its mobility. Unlike the massive railguns or energy weapons that other species favored, her rifle could be moved quickly and fired from concealment. She had 17 prepared positions around the outpost perimeter, each one calculated for optimal fields of fire. Through the chaos in the Zephyrian camp, Vexhai tried to restore order. Deploy counter-battery sensors. Locate that gunman. The sensors came online, sophisticated detection equipment designed to track incoming projectiles and trace them back to their point of origin. They immediately locked on Chen's first firing position atop the outpost tower. Target acquired. Coordinates transmitted to all artillery units. Energy blasts and projectile rounds hammered the tower where Chun had been positioned, turning the structure into rubble and twisted metal. The Zephyrians cheered, believing they had eliminated the threat. Chun, now in position 3 kilometers away behind a rocky outcropping, chambered her second round. Through her scope, she could see Vexhai coordinating the counter-battery fire, his distinctive red and gold armor marking him as a priority target. The second shot took the subcommander through the neck, dropping him instantly. This time the Zephyrians were ready for the sound delay, but knowing a shot was coming and being able to do something about it were very different things. Panic began to set in among the alien forces. Warriors who had trained their entire lives for honorable combat found themselves facing an enemy they could not see, could not reach, and could not fight in any conventional sense. The shots were coming from impossible distances far beyond the range of their own weapons. "Spread formation," shouted War Subleader Kreshtar, the third in command. "Make yourselves harder targets." Chun smiled grimly as she watched the enemy forces scatter. Spreading out would make them harder to hit in groups, but it also made coordination more difficult. And it didn't solve their fundamental problem. She was hunting them. The third shot took down a communications specialist, disrupting the enemy's coordination even further. The fourth eliminated an artillery commander just as he was calling in a bombardment on Chen's previous position. By the fifth shot, the Zephyrian forces were in complete disarray. Warriors who had never known fear in battle found themselves looking over their shoulders constantly, unable to focus on their mission. Every ridge line might hide the invisible killer. Every shadow could conceal death. In the Galactic Observer Station monitoring the battle, the various council members watched in stunned silence as the tactical display updated. The Zephyrian force markers were flashing red as communication was lost with one command element after another. "This is impossible," Commander Vextal hissed, his scales rippling with agitation. "One human cannot do this." Counselor Miriath studied the data feeds with growing amazement. The shots are coming from multiple locations across a 20-kilometer radius. How is she moving so quickly? "She isn't," said General Karmoth, his voice thoughtful for the first time in the proceedings. "Look at the timing. These positions were prepared in advance. She planned for this exact scenario." Dr. Velterra of the Ethereal Conclave spoke softly. "The humans, they prepared for war while claiming to seek peace. No, karamot gerektiv. They prepared for this specific battle. This was not random preparation. This was targeted planning for this exact tactical situation. The realization sent a chill through the observer station. The implications were staggering. Back on the surface, Chun had moved to her sixth position, a camouflaged hide built into the side of a hill 7 kilometers from the Zephyrian main force. Through her scope, she could see the enemy soldiers huddled behind whatever cover they could find, their formation completely broken. But she wasn't done. The real lesson was just beginning. She activated her communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies. Zephyrian forces, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. You have lost 7 command personnel in the last 30 minutes. Your formation is broken and your morale is shattered. I offer you one opportunity to withdraw. The response came from the surviving field commander, War Subleader Kreshtar. Human sniper, you fight without honor. Face us in honest battle. Chin's reply was cold and professional. War Subleader, you came here to judge human courage in battle. You assumed we would fight by your rules, using your definition of honor. You were wrong. Coward, show yourself. I am showing myself. I am showing you what humans do when we're forced to fight. We don't charge into battle looking for glorious death. We study our enemies, we prepare our ground, and we eliminate threats with maximum efficiency and minimum risk to our people. Chun chambered another round. Through her scope, she could see Kreshtar himself, distinguished by his command armor and the way other soldiers looked to him for leadership. You wanted to see human warfare, War Subleader. You're seeing it. The 8th shot into the conversation permanently. By midday, the Zephyrian assault force was in complete retreat. 3,000 of the galaxy's finest warriors, backed by armored vehicles and air support, fleeing from a single human with a rifle. The political implications rippled through the observer station like a seismic shock. Chun made her way back to the outpost, where Major Williams and his soldiers were watching the enemy withdrawal with expressions of amazement and professional respect. Captain, Williams said as she approached, I've been a soldier for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Just doing my job, Major. Chun began breaking down her rifle for transport. The Zephyrians wanted a demonstration of human military capabilities. They got one. In orbit, the Zephyrian fleet was already preparing to depart. Commander Vextal stood on his flagship's bridge, staring at the tactical display showing his forces in full retreat. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something he had never experienced before in relation to humans. Respect and fear. The galactic observers were silent as they processed what they had witnessed. A single human soldier had routed an entire army without support, without backup, using nothing but skill, preparation, and a weapon that most species would consider primitive. Counselor Mirath was the first to speak. Perhaps we have misjudged humanity's approach to warfare. General Karmoth nodded slowly. They do not fight as we fight. They do not seek glory in battle. They seek victory. Commander Vextal's voice came through the communication array, strained and bitter. The demonstration is concluded. The Zephyrian Empire withdraws its objection to human membership in the Alliance. In the command center of the human outpost, Captain Chun accepted a cup of coffee from Major Williams and settled into a chair to begin her after-action report. The battle was over, but the real war, the political battle for human acceptance in the galactic community, was just beginning. And humanity had just announced itself as a very different kind of player in that arena. Hashtag the message spreads 3 days after the Battle of Kepler, 442b, as it was already being called in intelligence briefings across the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chun found herself in an unexpected position. She was sitting in the most secure conference room on the Galactic Council station, surrounded by military leaders and diplomats from a dozen different species, all of whom were looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright alarm. The holographic display at the center of the table showed tactical recordings from the battle, frozen at the moment of Keth Var's death. The timestamp showed the incredible precision of the shot, the distance involved, and the environmental factors that had been overcome to achieve it. Admiral Thekmort of the Regillian Navy, a species known for their methodical approach to warfare, spoke first. Captain Chun, our analysis of your weapon suggests technology far in advance of what humanity has previously demonstrated. This smart ammunition, the targeting systems, the range capabilities, where did these come from? Chun sipped her coffee calmly before responding. The beverage was one of humanity's few successful exports to the galactic community, and she noted with amusement that half the beings at the table were drinking it. Admiral, with respect, those technologies have been available in human military circles for decades. We simply never had occasion to demonstrate them. Decades. General Karmoth leaned forward, his massive frame making the reinforced chair creak. You possess advanced military technology and have concealed it from the galactic community? Not concealed, Chen corrected. We included full technical specifications in our membership application materials. 3 years ago, page 2847 of the Military Technology Appendix, if you'd like to review it. The various council members exchanged glances, and Chen could see several of them accessing their personal data devices to check her claim. The silence stretched uncomfortably as they realized she was correct. Counselor Miraeth was the first to speak again. But, Captain, if these capabilities were documented, why did you never demonstrate them? Why allow the perception of military weakness to persist? Chen set down her coffee and leaned back in her chair. Counselor, may I ask you a question? Of course. In your species' military tradition, what is the highest form of victory? Miraeth considered this. Among my people, we value decisive action that minimizes casualties on both sides. And yours, General? Chen asked, turning to Karmoth. Honorable death in battle against a worthy enemy. The Ursoid replied without hesitation. Admiral Dekmo. Complete destruction of enemy capabilities with minimal resource expenditure. Chen nodded. 3 different species, 3 different military philosophies. Now, let me tell you about human military philosophy. She activated her personal data pad, and the holographic display changed to show a series of historical images from Earth. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, modern warfare, all flashing by in sequence. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. We've tried every possible approach to conflict. Heroic charges, massive battles, technological supremacy, economic warfare, psychological operations. We've done all. The images continued, showing the evolution of human warfare over millennia. And do you know what we learned from thousands of years of killing each other? The room was silent. We learned that the best fight is the one that never happens. The second best fight is the one that ends so quickly the enemy never has a chance to hurt you back. Commander Vextal, who had been invited to the briefing despite his earlier opposition, hissed softly. You speak of cowardice again. Chen turned to face him directly. Commander, 3 days ago you had 3,000 warriors, full air support, orbital backup, and every advantage except one. What was that one exception? Vextal's scales darkened with anger, but he answered honestly. Information. We did not know what we faced. Exactly. Chun touched her data pad again, and the display showed the current political situation across the galaxy. You all see humans as a military unknown. Some of you think we're cowards. Others suspect we're more dangerous than we appear. But here's what none of you understand. The display changed to show a map of human space, with shipping lanes, defense installations, and colony worlds marked. We've been preparing for galactic warfare since our first contact with alien species. Not because we wanted to fight, but because we needed to be ready if fighting became necessary. Admiral Thekmort studied the display with professional interest. These defensive positions, they're not arranged for traditional fleet engagement. No, they're not, Chun confirmed. They're designed around the assumption that any enemy we face will have superior numbers, better technology, and more resources. So we built our entire defense strategy around asymmetric warfare. General Karmoth's voice carried new respect. You prepare to fight a guerrilla war across the entire galaxy. If necessary, Chen highlighted several points on the map. Every human colony has hidden weapon caches. Every civilian transport has military-grade sensors and communication equipment. Every citizen has basic combat training. The implications were staggering. The human colonial network, which other species saw as a modest expansion into uninhabited systems, was actually a vast military infrastructure designed to support extended resistance operations. But, Captain, Dr. Velterra asked quietly, why reveal this now? You could have continued to appear harmless. Chun smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't the cold expression of a predator. Doctor, because the demonstration at Kepler 442b was never about proving we could fight. It was about proving we didn't want to. She touched her data pad one more time, and the display showed a comprehensive analysis of the Zephyrian assault. Commander Vextal brought overwhelming force against 50 human soldiers. I could have killed every one of his warriors from concealment. The range and precision of my weapons would have allowed it. Instead, I targeted only command personnel and stopped the moment retreat began. The room was quiet as the implication sank in. The message wasn't humans are dangerous, Chun continued. The message was humans are precise. We don't fight wars of extermination. We don't seek glorious death. We end conflicts as quickly and cleanly as possible. Counselor Miraeth was studying the tactical data with new understanding. You demonstrated restraint while revealing capability. Exactly. Chun stood and walked to the holographic display. Every species in this room has a different approach to warfare, but you all share one assumption. You assume that military power must be displayed to be effective. Humans learned long ago that hidden power is often more effective than visible power. Commander Vextal spoke grudgingly. Your point is taken, Captain. But this revelation changes the entire political balance of the galaxy. If humanity possesses this level of military preparation, then you need to ask yourselves one question, Chen interrupted. If we've had these capabilities all along, and we've never used them aggressively, what does that tell you about human intentions? The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. Each species represented at the table was reevaluating their assumptions about humanity and its place in the galactic community. Finally, Admiral Thekmort spoke. Captain, I believe I speak for many of us when I say that we may have misjudged human military philosophy. We prefer misunderstood, Chen replied diplomatically. And that's exactly why we wanted membership in this alliance. Not to contribute to galactic warfare, but to help prevent it. General Karmoth's rumbling voice carried a note of approval. A hidden blade that chooses not to cut. There's honor in that, even by our standards. Chen nodded respectfully. Thank you, General. That means more than you might know. As the briefing concluded and the various delegates began filing out, Counselor Miraeth approached Chen privately. Captain, may I ask a personal question? Of course. What you did at Kepler, 442b, how many humans could replicate that performance? Chen considered the question carefully. Counselor, every human military unit has at least one person with equivalent training. Most have several. Miraeth's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate deep thought. I see. And this is common knowledge among your people. Basic military doctrine, Chen confirmed. We call it distributed asymmetric capability. Never put all your deadliest assets in one place, and never let the enemy know how many you have. As Miraeth walked away, Chen could see the Centaurian already composing messages to her government. The political landscape was shifting just as humanity had intended. The galaxy was beginning to understand that Earth's children were not the harmless, cowardly species they had appeared to be. They were something much more dangerous and much more valuable, a species that possessed tremendous military power but preferred not to use it. In a galaxy where most conflicts were settled through force of arms, humanity had just revealed itself as the ultimate wild card. Not because they were the strongest, but because they were smart enough to win without fighting whenever possible. And when fighting became unavoidable, they were very, very good at ending it quickly. Hashtag the new alliance 6 months after the incident at Kepler. 442b, the Galactic Council chambers looked very different. The human delegation, once relegated to observer status in the back rows, now occupied a place of honor near the center of the assembly. Captain Sarah Chun, promoted to colonel and appointed as humanity's senior military advisor, sat beside Ambassador Harrison, watching as the political dynamics of the galaxy continued to shift. The current debate concerned the Hegemony War, a brutal conflict that had been raging in the Outer Rim for 3 years. The Krillian Hegemony, a militaristic empire from beyond the galactic border, had been steadily conquering systems with overwhelming force and advanced technology. Traditional galactic military responses had proven inadequate. The situation grows more desperate each day, reported Admiral Thekmort, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. The hegemony has taken 12 more systems in the past month. Their forces seem unstoppable. The holographic display showed the current state of the war. Red zones marked hegemony-controlled space, steadily expanding into previously neutral territory. Blue zones showed alliance defensive positions, steadily shrinking under the relentless assault. General Karmoth's massive form shifted in his chair. We have fought bravely, but conventional tactics are failing. The enemy's technology surpasses our own in every category. Their ships are faster, their weapons more powerful, their armor more resilient. Commander Vextal, his attitude toward humans considerably changed since their first encounter, spoke next. The hegemony expects us to meet them in direct battle. They have prepared for conventional fleet engagements and ground assaults. Perhaps it is time to consider unconventional approaches. All eyes turned to Colonel Chun, who had been quietly studying the tactical reports throughout the briefing. She looked up to find the entire council waiting for her response. Colonel Chun, said Council Prime Zarthek, you have remained silent throughout this discussion. What is humanity's assessment of the situation? Chun stood and approached the holographic display, her movements calm and measured. Honored counselors, may I ask why the hegemony is winning this war? Superior technology and numbers, Admiral Thekmort replied immediately. Respectfully, Admiral, that's how they're winning battles. I asked why they're winning the war. The distinction caused several council members to exchange glances. Chun manipulated the display, highlighting key systems that had fallen to hegemony forces. Look at their conquest pattern. They're not taking random systems. They're following trade routes, resource lines, and strategic choke points. They're not just destroying your fleets. They're dismantling your infrastructure. She highlighted additional data. Every system they conquer becomes a forward base for the next assault. They're using captured resources to fuel their expansion. Classic strategic warfare doctrine. Councilor Miraf leaned forward. And how would humanity approach this situation? Chun smiled, but this time it was the expression of a teacher rather than a predator. We wouldn't fight their fleets at all. The statement sent a murmur through the chamber. General Karmoth's voice carried disbelief. You would abandon the outer systems to focus on core defense. No, General. We would make their conquered territory more trouble than it's worth. Chun activated her data pad, and the display changed to show a detailed analysis of hegemony supply lines. Every conquering army has the same vulnerability. The longer their supply chains become, the more exposed they are to disruption. Red lines appeared on the display, showing the flow of resources from conquered systems back to hegemony core territories. They've conquered 12 systems in the past month, but look at what that requires. Additional data overlaid the map, showing shipping schedules, resource allocation, and communication networks. They need constant supply runs to maintain their forward bases. They need regular communication with their command structure. They need to process and transport captured resources. All of this requires infrastructure that can be targeted. Admiral Thekmort studied the display with growing interest. You're suggesting raids against supply lines rather than direct engagement with their fleets. I'm suggesting we make them play defense for a change, Chun corrected. Right now, they can concentrate their forces for assault because they know their rear areas are secure. Change that assumption. She manipulated the display again, showing potential target points throughout hegemony-controlled space. Small, fast units hitting supply convoys, communication relays, resource processing facilities. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger major fleet response, but persistent enough to require constant security patrols. Guerrilla warfare, Commander Vextal said, his tone carrying new understanding. Force them to spread their forces thin, protecting territory they've already conquered. Exactly. And while they're dealing with that, Chun highlighted several key systems near the front lines. Strategic retreats that leave behind unpleasant surprises. She showed detailed schematics of what appeared to be standard civilian infrastructure. Booby-trapped facilities, hidden weapon caches, sleeper agents in captured populations. Make every conquered system a potential rebellion waiting to happen. The council chamber was quiet as the delegates absorbed the implications. Dr. Velterra spoke softly. Colonel, this approach would require considerable sacrifice from civilian populations in contested areas. Yes, it would, Chun admitted, but less sacrifice than conventional warfare would demand. And It offers something that direct military confrontation doesn't, which is, asked Council Prime Zarthek. Hope. Chen manipulated the display one final time, showing projected casualty figures for both conventional and asymmetric warfare approaches. Traditional fleet battles result in massive casualties with uncertain outcomes. Asymmetric warfare results in smaller, distributed losses with cumulative strategic effect. General Karmoth rumbled thoughtfully. You propose to bleed them slowly rather than face them directly. I propose to make conquest more expensive than they're willing to pay, Chen corrected. Every conquering empire has a breaking point where the cost of holding territory exceeds the benefit of controlling it. Admiral Thekmort was running calculations on his personal device. Colonel, implementing this strategy would require capabilities that most of our species lack. Specialized training, equipment, coordination, which is why humanity is offering to assist. Ambassador Harrison spoke for the first time during the briefing. We have the doctrine, the equipment, and the personnel to implement asymmetric warfare operations. Commander Vexdal's scales showed patterns of surprise. You're volunteering to fight in this war? We're volunteering to help you fight it more effectively, Chen clarified. Human special operations teams can train local resistance forces, provide technical support for sabotage operations, and coordinate intelligence networks. She paused, letting the implications sink in. More importantly, we can show you how to make the hegemony's conquest strategy work against them. Counselor Mirieth's bioluminescent patterns indicated deep thought. This is a fundamental shift in how the Alliance approaches military conflict. Yes, it is, Chen agreed. The question is whether you're willing to try something different or whether you prefer to keep losing the same way you've been losing. The blunt assessment stung, but it also cut through the political niceties that have been hampering effective military planning. Council Prime Zarthek called for a brief recess to allow delegates to consult with their governments. During the break, Chen found herself approached by various military leaders, all asking detailed questions about human asymmetric warfare doctrine. The transformation in attitude was remarkable. 6 months ago, these same officers had dismissed humans as militarily irrelevant. Now, they were seeking human expertise to solve their most pressing strategic problem. When the session reconvened, the vote was unanimous. The Galactic Alliance formally requested human assistance in developing and implementing asymmetric warfare strategies against the Krillian hegemony. Colonel Chun accepted the responsibility with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the crisis. But, privately, she knew this moment marked a fundamental change in humanity's relationship with the galaxy. They were no longer the harmless newcomers seeking acceptance. They were the specialists called in when conventional approaches failed. They were the ones who understood that warfare was about more than ships and weapons and brave charges in a battle. As the council session ended, Chen received a private message from Earth Command. Colonel, preliminary reports from the Outer Rim suggest the first human advisory teams are already achieving results. Hegemony supply lines are experiencing significant disruption. Well done. She smiled and closed the communication. The galaxy was about to learn another lesson about humanity. When they committed to helping their allies, they didn't do it halfway. The Krillian hegemony had spent 3 years learning to defeat conventional galactic military forces. Now, they're going to learn what it meant to fight humans. And in the shadows of a dozen conquered worlds, small teams of specialists were already teaching local populations that conquest was just the beginning of the war, not the end of it. The galaxy's perspective on humanity had changed forever. They were no longer seen as weak or cowardly. They were seen as something far more valuable and far more dangerous. The allies you wanted on your side when conventional wisdom wasn't enough. The hegemony war was about to become a very different kind of conflict. And humanity was going to show the galaxy that sometimes the best way to win a war was to change the rules entirely.